Clara's heart pounded as she stepped into the softly lit apartment, the air buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and the low hum of birthday music. Tonight was Marcus's birthday, and the entire circle of friends had gathered to celebrate him. But she couldn't shake the knot in her stomach, the nerves twisting like a storm inside her, making her palms sweat and her thoughts race. She adjusted the strap of her dress one last time, wishing she could disappear or somehow become invisible, but she couldn't. Tonight she had to face him, the man she had loved quietly for years, whose smile had haunted her dreams, whose laugh she still remembered in lonely moments, and whose presence made her pulse quicken even when he wasn't looking. The party was in full swing, people telling stories, joking about Marcus's little mistakes, his clumsiness, his old romances, and Clara felt a strange mixture of amusement and anxiety, a dangerous cocktail that made her words reckless even before she spoke. She found herself laughing along, trying to seem normal, but her mind was elsewhere, obsessing over what she could say, how she could be noticed, how she could somehow make him see her in the way she had always seen him, a way filled with longing and quiet desire, a way that teetered dangerously on the edge of confession. As the evening progressed, glasses were refilled, music shifted to slower songs, and the group gathered closer, warmth and laughter filling the room, but Clara's attention was only on him, on Marcus, who moved through the crowd with effortless charm, talking, smiling, shaking hands, unaware of the storm building in her chest. When it came time for the toast, everyone's eyes turned toward him, glasses raised, and Clara felt an irrational pressure, an urge to say something shocking, something memorable, something that would force him to notice her completely, because inside she had always carried a part of him that the world didn't see, a part only she understood, a love layered with frustration, admiration, and silent yearning. Standing there, glass in hand, with the room watching, she felt her mouth move before her brain could intervene, words she hadn't planned, words that were cruel in their truth, escaping into the air. "You're lucky I didn't abort our kid." The room froze instantly, laughter dying mid-note, eyes widening in shock, and Clara's stomach dropped as she saw the disbelief on Marcus's face, the way his smile faltered, how his eyes darkened with hurt and confusion, how the energy around them seemed to stop, leaving only an unbearable silence that pressed down on her like a physical weight. She realized instantly she had crossed a line, that the reckless joke meant to grab attention and perhaps elicit laughter had instead sliced through the air like a knife, cutting Marcus and everyone else in the room, leaving them stunned. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, whispering to one another, unsure of what to do, and Clara's own mind reeled with panic, embarrassment, and regret, every second stretching out painfully as she tried to figure out how to fix what couldn't be undone. Marcus's expression hardened, his jaw tight, his hand gripping his glass like it grounded him against the storm of emotion Clara had just unleashed, and before she could say anything, before anyone could intervene, he turned and walked toward the door, each step measured, deliberate, leaving Clara frozen in the center of the room, surrounded by whispers, stares, and the soft echo of her own foolishness. The door clicked behind him, final and absolute, and Clara's chest tightened as if the air itself had been sucked out, leaving her gasping, unable to move, unable to speak, her mind racing through 1,000 scenarios, imagining the hurt he felt, the betrayal, the shock, the disbelief, and knowing that whatever had existed between them, the fragile thread of connection and unspoken affection, was now frayed, perhaps irreparably. She tried to call out, her voice barely a whisper, but the words faltered, caught in her throat, and she sank into the nearest chair, head in her hands, heart hammering, watching the room resume its muted activity, people trying to pretend nothing had happened, the warmth and laughter that had filled the space now tainted by her impulsive cruelty. Every face seemed to reflect a mixture of pity, judgment, and confusion, reminding her that she had made a choice that would haunt the rest of the evening, perhaps the rest of their lives. And as she sat there, trembling, she realized that love could be dangerous, that words could wound deeper than intentions, and that sometimes, in trying to be noticed, in trying to provoke a reaction, she had destroyed the very thing she had cherished most. The clock ticked on, music played softly in the background, the party continued, yet Clara felt frozen in a moment that would replay endlessly in her mind, a single cruel sentence that had changed everything, a joke that was never meant to be funny, and a man she loved more than she could admit, now gone, leaving her to confront the weight of her actions, the depth of her feelings, and the uncertain, painful consequences of a single thoughtless moment. Clara woke up the next morning with a heavy weight on her chest, the kind that made her limbs feel like lead, her head throbbing with the memory of last night, the cruel joke that had escaped her mouth, the sharp, horrifying silence that had followed, and most of all, the image of Marcus's face as he had turned and walked out without a word, a door clicking behind him like the final punctuation on something she could never undo. She stared at her phone, willing it to buzz with a message, a call, anything to let her know he was still reachable, still willing to hear her out, but the screen remained stubbornly silent, mocking her with its emptiness, and with each passing hour the silence grew heavier, more suffocating, as if the world itself had joined him in punishing her for her words. She tried to reach out, sending messages that seemed to vanish into a void, apologizing in every way she could imagine, explaining herself, begging forgiveness, promising she had meant nothing but a joke, but the responses never came, and the absence of reply hit her harder than any confrontation could have, leaving her pacing her apartment in circles, clutching her head, muttering fragments of what she should have said, what she wished she could take back, and wondering if she had finally destroyed any chance of being close to him ever again. The room felt smaller, suffocating, the sunlight filtering through the curtains mocking her with its cheerfulness, the city outside moving on oblivious to the heartbreak that weighed on her, and every familiar sound, the hum of traffic, distant voices, the clatter of neighbors, reminded her of the emptiness left behind when Marcus had walked away, leaving not just the party, but her, stranded in a silence that seemed to stretch endlessly. Clara's mind replayed the scene over and over, each iteration more vivid, sharper, as if the cruel joke had tattooed itself into her memory, her heart racing at every detail, the laughter that had died mid-sentence, the shocked gasps of the guests, the way Marcus's eyes had flicked between disbelief and hurt, and most of all the way he had turned his back, leaving her standing there, a mixture of shame, panic, and longing knotting inside her so tightly she could barely breathe. She wandered through her apartment, touching the books, the framed photos, the little trinkets she had collected, each one suddenly meaningless, each one a reminder of the life that continued without him, the world that had gone on while she had spoken words that may have shattered everything, and she felt a deep, gnawing sense of regret, knowing that sometimes mistakes couldn't be fixed by apologies, and sometimes words once said could never be unsaid, leaving only the hollow ache of what might have been. Her friends tried to console her, texting gentle words, dropping by with smiles and coffees, but even their presence felt distant, superficial compared to the emptiness she felt, and she realized that grief for a person she had hurt was unlike any other grief, a tangled mixture of guilt, love, and desperation that made her feel both needy and ashamed at the same time, her stomach twisting with each thought of him. Every sound outside seemed to trigger memories, and even mundane things, a laugh from a neighbor, the scent of fresh coffee, a text notification, made her flinch and hope it was him reaching out, only to be disappointed again, sending her spinning back into despair, the hours stretching endlessly, the walls of her apartment closing in, suffocating her in loneliness, and she wondered if Marcus even wanted her to contact him, or if she had pushed him so far that he would never forgive, never look at her the way he had before, never laugh at the things only she understood, never share those quiet, intimate moments that had always made her heart feel lighter when she was near him. She thought about the times they had shared, the small moments she had taken for granted, the way he had smiled at her when she told a story, the way he listened as if every word she said was the most important in the world, the subtle touches that lingered just a second too long, the inside jokes that had no meaning to anyone else but them, the quiet evenings where they had sat close without speaking, feeling the comfort of being together, and suddenly all of that felt so fragile, so delicate, as if her single careless joke had shattered the trust and intimacy she had spent years nurturing silently, leaving her vulnerable and exposed in ways she had never experienced before. Night came again, and Clara found herself unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city, imagining him somewhere else, perhaps in his apartment, perhaps pacing, perhaps feeling hurt in ways she could not comfort, and she longed to reach him, to erase the words, to hold him close, to explain that it had been a terrible mistake, a moment of thoughtless panic, a misfired attempt at humor that had gone terribly wrong. Yet she knew that words could only do so much, that sometimes the act of speaking could not repair the invisible cracks that now ran through their connection. She imagined approaching him, knocking on his door, seeing the hurt in his eyes soften just slightly, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers. But even as she imagined it, the fear of rejection, the fear that he would never forgive, kept her rooted to her bed, heart hammering, stomach twisting, mind a whirlwind of hope and despair. Every memory of him flooded her mind. The way he laughed, the way he had noticed the little things, the way he had made her feel alive even in moments of doubt, and yet, those memories now carried a sharp edge, a reminder that she had risked it all with one impulsive, cruel joke. And as the hours crawled by, Clara felt herself unraveling, each thought spiraling into anxiety, longing, and a desperate wish to turn back time, to rewind the night, to replace the words with something tender, something that would have made him smile, something that would have kept him by her side instead of leaving her alone in the echoing silence of her own guilt. She wandered through her apartment again, touching objects that now seemed meaningless, replaying the sound of his voice in her head, imagining the hurt etched into his features, the way his hand had gripped the doorframe as he left, the way his eyes had searched hers one last time before walking away, and the loneliness of that image pressed down on her chest so heavily that she felt she could barely breathe, the silence of her phone a cruel reminder that actions have consequences, that words can wound deeper than intentions, and that love, no matter how quiet, can be destroyed in an instant by a single thoughtless act. The day stretched endlessly, the sun moving across the sky without regard for her torment, her mind filled with plans of how to apologize, what to say, what to do to make him understand, to make him see that her heart had always been with him, that she had only wanted to be seen, that she had only wanted him to notice the depth of what she felt. Yet every plan seemed inadequate, every word insufficient, and she felt trapped in a maze of her own making, surrounded by walls of regret, longing, and the unbearable knowledge that she may have lost him forever. Evening fell, the city lights twinkling outside her window, mocking her with their cheerfulness, while inside, Clara sat with her phone in her lap, unable to press send, unable to move, unable to stop thinking about him, and the weight of her mistake pressed down on her so heavily that tears streamed down her cheeks, hot and relentless, leaving her feeling raw, empty, and desperate, realizing that love can be fragile, that hearts can be broken with careless words, and that sometimes, even with all the longing in the world, reconciliation depends not only on desire but on timing, courage, and the willingness of the other person to forgive. She thought of the way he had walked away, the hurt etched on his face, and knew that tonight, and perhaps many nights to come, she would lie awake haunted by that single moment, the cruel joke that had escaped her lips, the silence that followed, and the uncertainty of whether he would ever return, ever forgive, or ever look at her with the tenderness and understanding she had always cherished, leaving her trapped in a whirlwind of emotions, love, regret, longing, fear, and hope, each one battling for dominance in her heart as the night stretched on. And Clara realized that sometimes, the hardest part of loving someone is learning how to live with your own mistakes, and waiting, uncertain and vulnerable, for the person who matters most to you to decide if the love they felt can survive the hurt you caused. Days had passed since Marcus had walked out of the party, leaving Clara with a hollow ache in her chest that refused to fade, and now she found herself wandering the streets almost unconsciously, her mind consumed with memories of him, wondering where he was, what he was doing, whether he was thinking of her, or if her reckless words had permanently severed the fragile thread that had always connected them, and she realized that her heart had never felt so heavy, so restless, so desperately yearning for someone whose anger and hurt were now barriers she didn't know how to cross. She moved through the city like a ghost, the sounds of cars, distant laughter, and city life washing over her, yet all she could hear was the echo of the words she had spoken, that cruel joke that had shattered the night and left him gone, and she felt a combination of regret, fear, and longing that twisted her stomach into knots, each thought of him like a knife pressing into her chest, leaving her breathless and trembling. It was late afternoon when she ducked into a small cafe seeking some solace, some distraction from the storm inside her, hoping the aroma of coffee and the soft murmur of people would calm her racing mind. But as she scanned the room, her pulse stopped, and her heart slammed against her ribs, because there he was, Marcus, sitting alone at a corner table, a cup of coffee before him, eyes staring out the window, lost in thought, oblivious to the world yet so intensely present in her mind that she felt both terror and relief at seeing him there, and for a moment she could barely breathe, frozen in place as her mind ran 1,000 scenarios. Should she approach him, run, apologize, beg, explain, or simply leave and preserve the shred of dignity she had left? Her legs moved on instinct, carrying her forward despite the fear knotting every muscle, and she slid into the chair across from him, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks, the tremor in her hands, and the frantic beat of her heart as their eyes met, hers wide with guilt and longing, his a mixture of surprise, caution, and something else she couldn't yet identify, something deeper, a flicker of hope or perhaps the residue of the connection they had once shared, the bond that had always existed quietly, beneath the surface, ready to ignite with a single spark if only given the chance. Marcus's voice broke the silence first, soft yet sharp, trembling with emotion he was trying to control. "Clara," he said, the single word carrying more weight than any sentence, and she wanted to collapse, to explain herself, to pour out every ounce of remorse and love she had been holding back. But words stuck in her throat, leaving her shaking and desperate as she searched his face for any sign that he might forgive her, that the door had not completely closed, that maybe, just maybe, there was a path back to him if she could tread carefully, humbly, and honestly. She opened her mouth, but no sound came, and the silence between them stretched, heavy and electric, each second an eternity, filled with unspoken apologies, lingering hurt, and the fragile thread of longing that still tethered their hearts together despite the damage she had caused. And she realized that sometimes love is not about grand gestures or perfect timing, but about showing up even when you are afraid, about daring to face the consequences of your actions, and about hoping that the person you love is willing to meet you halfway, willing to see past the mistake and into the heart beneath. Marcus leaned back slightly, his hands wrapped around the warm mug, fingers tightening and loosening in a rhythm that betrayed his inner turmoil, his eyes studying her, searching for truth in the quiver of her lips, the shake of her shoulders, the silent apology in the way she looked at him, and Clara felt a mixture of relief and terror, knowing that everything now hung in this delicate balance, that the outcome depended on his willingness to trust her again, on his willingness to forgive, and perhaps, even more frighteningly, on his ability to love again after feeling hurt so deeply by her impulsive words. The cafe around them moved on, the soft music, the chatter of other patrons, the clatter of cups and saucers, all fading into a blur as Clara focused entirely on Marcus, memorizing the lines of his face, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his eyes reflected pain and lingering affection at the same time, and she realized that even though she had terrified him, even though she had hurt him, he had not yet closed the door completely, and that fragile truth gave her both hope and fear, hope that she could make amends, fear that one wrong word now could destroy everything remaining. She finally found her voice, trembling but steady. "Marcus, I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice breaking under the weight of her emotion. "I didn't mean it. Last night, it was a horrible joke. I never should have said it, and I know it hurt you." His eyes softened slightly, but he remained silent, as if measuring her sincerity, as if trying to gauge whether the woman he had once trusted and loved was still the person sitting in front of him, capable of honesty, remorse, and vulnerability. She continued, her words spilling out now, urgent, heartfelt. "I've been thinking about it non-stop, about you, about us, about everything I said and did. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could undo the hurt. Marcus raised a hand gently, stopping her, and she froze, the words dying on her lips as she looked into his eyes, searching for a sign of forgiveness, of understanding, of any way forward, and in that moment, she realized the fragility of love, how it could be wounded by thoughtless words yet still endure in the quiet spaces between hurt and hope. He took a slow breath, his voice low but steady. "Clara, it hurt, yes. What you said, it cut me deeper than you realize. But I also can't deny that I still care about you, that seeing you here now, owning up to your mistake, facing me instead of running, it matters. It matters more than you know." Her heart leapt, tears filling her eyes, relief mixing with lingering fear, because his words were not a guarantee of everything being fixed, but they were a crack in the wall, a chance, a fragile opening that could allow them to rebuild if they chose to. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past days pressing down on both of them, the air heavy with unspoken apologies, lingering hurt, and tentative hope, and Clara realized that healing would take time, that trust could not be demanded, that love had to be nurtured carefully, step by step, word by word, gesture by gesture. But at least now, Marcus had not turned away completely. At least now there was a path, faint and uncertain, that might lead them back to each other. She reached out slowly, almost hesitantly, and placed her hand near his on the table, and Marcus, after a pause, let his fingers brush against hers, a small, careful contact, but enough to ignite a spark of relief and hope inside her, enough to remind her that love, even when wounded, still had the power to survive if treated with patience, understanding, and care. The cafe felt smaller, warmer, more intimate, as if the world had shrunk to just the two of them, a space where apologies could be made, hearts could be mended, and the fragile beginnings of reconciliation could take root, and Clara realized that sometimes, love requires courage, requires facing the person you've hurt, and requires accepting the consequences of your actions while hoping that the other person is willing to see the heart beneath the mistakes. They talked, slowly at first, words cautious, measured, each one carrying the weight of truth and vulnerability, sharing their feelings, their fears, their regrets, and even in that cautious dialogue, there was a sense of relief, a sense of connection reawakening, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the bond they had shared could survive the storm of thoughtless words and find its way back into light and warmth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the cafe, Clara felt a mix of emotions: relief, love, fear, hope, and longing, all tangled together in a way that made her chest ache, but also made her heart feel alive again, because Marcus was there, because he had not walked away completely, because they were talking, really talking, and that was the first step towards something fragile and beautiful, something worth fighting for, and she knew that no matter what happened next, this moment, the acknowledgement of hurt, the willingness to face it, the tentative spark of reconciliation, would stay with her forever, a reminder that love is never simple, that words can wound, that hearts can break, but that courage, honesty, and vulnerability can sometimes bring even the most wounded love back to life. The evening stretched on, the cafe now quieter, shadows growing long as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, painting the room in golden hues, and Clara felt every heartbeat in her chest as she sat across from Marcus, hands trembling slightly, emotions swirling like a storm she could no longer control, a mixture of fear, hope, longing, and desperation that left her breathless and raw, because this moment, fragile and tense, could determine everything between them, whether the walls they had built from hurt and misunderstanding would crumble or stand, and she realized how much she had taken for granted, how much she had risked with a single thoughtless joke, how easily love, even when deeply felt, could be threatened by carelessness. Yet here he was, looking at her with eyes that were wary, cautious, but not entirely closed, and that gave her a sliver of hope she clung to desperately, willing to believe that perhaps they could mend the damage. Step by step, word by word, gesture by gesture, Marcus's gaze lingered on her, tracing the lines of her face, noting the nervous tremble in her fingers, the gloss of tears that hadn't yet fallen, the vulnerability she carried so openly, and he inhaled slowly, as if bracing himself to confront not just the pain of last night but the deep connection he still felt, the undeniable attraction, the lingering affection that had never disappeared even in the days apart, and Clara, noticing the tension in his jaw and the softness behind his cautious demeanor, felt a flicker of relief mixed with anxiety, knowing that the road ahead would not be easy, that healing was not immediate, and that love sometimes demanded patience, forgiveness, and courage in equal measure. She spoke first, voice soft, yet urgent. "Marcus, I know I hurt you. I said something cruel, something I can't take back, and I've been thinking about it every moment since. I didn't mean it. I was trying to be funny, but it came out wrong. I can't express how sorry I am," and her words hung in the air, carrying all the sincerity she could muster, trembling with emotion, with every fiber of her being laid bare, while Marcus listened, the silence stretching between them heavy but necessary, allowing him to process, to feel, to measure the weight of her apology against the hurt he had experienced, because he knew her heart, knew the essence of the woman he had loved quietly for years, and even in the shadow of pain, he could sense the truth in her confession, the raw honesty that sought to rebuild what had been broken. He finally spoke, voice low but steady, each word deliberate. "Clara, it hurt. It cut me deeper than you can imagine. I felt blindsided, shocked, and angry. But seeing you here now, facing me, not running, not hiding, shows me something important. It shows me that you care, that you feel, that you're willing to admit your mistakes, and that matters more than I thought it would." And her heart leapt, a mixture of relief and continued anxiety washing over her, because his words were neither full forgiveness nor rejection but a delicate balance. A doorway opened just enough for them to step through cautiously, each hesitant step carrying the potential for pain or redemption. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat, tears threatening to spill over. "I do care, Marcus. I've always cared. I never wanted to hurt you. I was scared, nervous, foolish, and I acted without thinking. But I love you. Even in my fear, even in my mistakes, I love you, and she reached out slowly, almost trembling, her hand hovering over his on the table, the silent gesture carrying more meaning than words could ever express, a plea for understanding, a bridge over the chasm she had created, a reminder that beneath the anger and hurt, there was still connection, still intimacy, still the shared history of hearts entwined in subtle, unspoken ways. Marcus's hand moved slightly, fingers brushing against hers. Tentative, testing, a small, careful spark of contact that sent warmth racing through Clara's veins, and he exhaled, a long, steady breath, the tension in his shoulders softening fractionally as he considered the truth in her eyes, the sincerity etched into her expression, the way she had bared herself fully, risking rejection to reach him, to reach the love they had shared, and in that moment, he realized that their bond, though fragile, was not irreparable, that hearts could be wounded and still heal if treated with care, honesty, and patience, and that sometimes love demanded facing fear head-on, speaking truth, and trusting the other person enough to see past mistakes into the intentions behind them. They sat like that for a long time, the quiet of the cafe wrapping around them, the golden light softening the edges of their emotions, allowing space for reflection, connection, and tentative forgiveness. And Clara felt herself exhale for the first time in days, a mixture of relief, hope, and lingering anxiety settling over her, because the path forward was uncertain, but at least it existed, a delicate thread leading from hurt to understanding, from fear to possibility, from separation to reconnection. Marcus finally spoke again, his voice firmer, still cautious but tinged with warmth. Clara, I can't promise everything will be perfect. I can't promise I won't feel hurt again, that I won't be cautious, that I won't struggle to trust immediately. But I also can't ignore what we have, what we shared, what still lingers between us. Maybe we can start over, carefully, slowly, and see where it leads. And her tears fell freely now, warm and unrelenting, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and overwhelming emotion flooding her, because even though he was cautious, even though the journey ahead would be challenging, he had not walked away completely, he had not closed the door, and for the first time in days, she felt a fragile but tangible sense of hope, the kind that ignites slowly, cautiously, but persistently, reminding her that love, even when wounded, could find its way back if nurtured with honesty, care, and vulnerability. They began to talk, slowly at first, carefully choosing words, sharing feelings, fears, regrets, and desires, their conversation a delicate dance of emotion, each sentence a step toward rebuilding trust, each glance a reminder of connection, each small gesture a test of willingness to forgive and move forward. And in that dialogue, Clara realized that healing was not instant, that love could not be demanded, but that it could be rekindled through courage, honesty, and shared vulnerability. As the night deepened, the city outside sparkling with lights, Clara and Marcus lingered, neither wanting to leave, both savoring the quiet intimacy of being together again, the warmth of contact, the unspoken understanding, the tentative reconnection of hearts that had been shaken but not broken. And Clara understood that love, when true, was resilient, that mistakes could wound but not destroy entirely, that hearts could break and heal, and that forgiveness was not a single act but a process nurtured with patience, honesty, and courage. She felt the warmth of his hand finally close around hers, the tension easing slightly, the spark of connection igniting, a reminder that while the past could not be erased, the future was theirs to shape together, carefully, intentionally, and with love. Marcus's voice broke the comfortable silence. We'll take it slow, Clara. Step by step. But we'll try. That's what matters. She nodded, tears streaming, relief washing over her, heart swelling with a mixture of joy and lingering fear, because love after hurt was fragile, but it was alive, and for now, that was enough. Outside, the world continued, indifferent and bustling, but inside that quiet cafe, two hearts beat cautiously, vulnerably, yet resiliently, slowly rediscovering each other, learning that love could survive missteps, mistakes, and pain if approached with honesty, patience, and care. And Clara realized that this moment, fragile and beautiful, would remain etched in her memory, a testament to the power of courage, truth, and the willingness to fight for love even when the path is uncertain and the heart feels battered, because in the end, love that endures is not perfect, but it is worth every step, every risk, every word spoken with sincerity, and every moment spent rebuilding what was once broken, slowly, gently, and with hope that the heart can heal, forgive, and rediscover the joy of connection that makes life worth living.